Welcome to Layers of Communication on TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and the BBM Global Network. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart. If you want to join our conversation, you can call in at 1-866-451-1451. I'd love to have you join our conversation today. So here's the question for today. We all have these voices that we hear in our head, whether we want to admit it or not. They're there, trying to tell us what we want to do or what we should do. But how do we decide if it's a voice we really want to listen to? How do we recognize our inner voice? Have you heard your inner voice lately? I've just heard a bunch of different voices talking to you. And I'm not talking about schizophrenia. That's a different story. But we all have influences. Like if I'm going out to do something that maybe my mom wouldn't have approved of when I was a kid, I hear my mom's voice in my head saying, Lydia, what are you doing? You know, there's voices and influences of people in our life that come to us. And we're going to talk today about how do we recognize our own inner voice that's ours, that we do want to listen to our own inner voice, right? So here's the story. We're ready for the story today. Once a month or so, my boys and my husband all go out on a scout camp out. Every month, my husband's a scoutmaster with the Boy Scouts, and my boys are all in Scouts. So in February or January, they usually go out to a cold place, and they all go. It's not just the young 12, 13-year-old boys. All of the boys in the scouting program in our local troops go to this one. And so it was just me and my daughter, and we try to do a girls' night every time that the boys go out. But my other boys are getting older, and they don't always go. So this was like a big deal. We're going to have girls' night. And so that means we're going to watch a chick flick or paint our nails or just eat stuff that the girls want to eat that maybe the boys don't want to eat. Anything that we want to do that the boys maybe would vote against, we try to fit into our girls' night. So I had this craft clear back from girls' camp last year that we didn't finish. And so we're going to get these out. And it's a block of wood, and you hammer nails into it in a pattern. It's like a heart out of nails. And then you take a string and you wind it around and decorate and fill in this heart. And you can go crazy with it or make it all organized. And so we're hammering these nails into the block of wood. And I was like, oh, it's crooked. Try again. Oh my goodness. It was so hard to hammer a nail in straight. But we tried it, and it worked out good enough. And if you stand back, you can't really tell that it's really crooked. And then we got our string, and my daughter just went to town on hers. She just had a great time doing hers. And I thought, I'm going to make mine into a pattern. And it didn't look so good. And so I undid it. I unwound the string from all of it. And I did it again. And it didn't look very good again. It was like all lopsided on one side of the heart had a bunch of string and the other side looked kind of bare. So I undid it again because it wasn't balanced. And I looked at hers and I went, yours looks so great. I want mine to look like yours. So I tried to imitate her string art. And I did it again and again until it looked good enough. I was like, whew, that was a lot of work. I could do it, but it definitely was not my strength. I had fun with it and everything was great, but just, if you're going to hire somebody to hammer nails in straight, I'm not your girl for that. Don't hire me if you want it to look straight and be beautiful. It looked good. It looked good enough. I'm happy with it. It was fun. Now, comparing that to a couple of weeks ago when we did painting, and oh my goodness, I love painting. It was so fun and so easy. And I was like, oh, this is great. And I took my painting home and I showed my husband, and he said, yeah, I remember you used to paint all the time. Remember that time we lived with Verla and you were painting all the time? Remember that cat that you made for my mom? It looked so lifelike. This cat was amazing. It was a carved out piece of wood to the shape of a cat. So when you walked into the room, if you didn't know that it was just a painting on a piece of wood, you would think it was a real cat. I was pretty good at it. I was pretty impressed. And it was fun and took a lot of time. But that difference of, oh, yeah, this is what I love. I haven't painted in so long. I forgot that I love to paint. Compared to, whew, been there, done that with the string art. That was great. We've done that. We could check that off the to-do list. And that is a difference of finding our inner voice. To me, my inner voice says, you're not a string art person. You can do it, and you can be okay at it, and you could probably learn and practice and get better at it, but it's not what we'd call a strength. It's not one of my gifts or talents to be good at. And our inner voice speaks to us and tells us who we really are at the core. So that's one of the reasons why we want to figure out, how do we recognize our inner voice? And maybe we don't need to go through an experience and go, oh, that was horrible. That's not my thing. Maybe there might be a way to recognize it before we have to go through the whole experience and take the other path, so we can strengthen what needs to be strengthened before. And this is a great layer of our communication layers, of finding our inner voice and being able to recognize and honor other people's inner voices instead of being like, oh, well, you should do string art. It's so fun. You really should do it. It is fun and it is great for other people who have that gift of hammering nails in straight. Go for it. It is great. Other people who haven't excelled at straight nails, yeah, you don't have to do it if you don't want to. And that's one of the keys too, is you don't have to do something if it's not going to help you and benefit you. There's lots of things that we want to work on and strengthen. We all have weaknesses that we want to be made stronger. But what if we also focused on strengthening our strengths? What if we were like, oh, I'm super good at this, but I'm horrible at that. Let's focus on making what you're good at even better. I see a lot of people in the world, probably most of us, I would think, we find our weaknesses and we want to be better. We want to hide our weaknesses, turn them into strengths, and we forget that we do have some strengths. Everybody has something that they're good at, something that is amazing. Now, I'm using artistic kind of things, the outward, obvious examples. There's dancing and all these other gifts and talents that come to mind when you think of strengths. But there's other strengths too. I remember my neighbor. Oh, I loved her so much. She's moved and I still love her, but I don't get to see her very often anymore. And Stephanie was really amazing. She was not a dancer. She was not a painter. She was not any of those outward kind of talents that are thought of at first. Her gift was mathematics and tutoring and training and teaching people. I just loved that. And she was amazing at accepting that that was her strength. Now, over the years, she developed a really good talent for sewing, but she had to work at it. So today we're going to talk with my good friend Lauri about recognizing our inner voice so we can hold on to that and maybe figure out a better way of communicating to our strengths, with our strengths, to other people's strengths. All right, we're going to take a break. So stay really close. We're going to come back with Lauri. It's going to be such a great visit. You're listening on TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and the BBM Global Network. This is Layers of Communication, and I'm your host, Lydia Taggart. Stay close. Welcome back to Layers of Communication on iHeartRadio, the BBM Global Network, and TuneIn Radio. The number to call in if you want to join our conversation is 1-866-451-1451. This is Layers of Communication, and I am your host, Lydia Taggart. I want to tell you about my good friend, Lauri Shoenfeld. She is an author and motivational speaker who shares her truths about being a child abuse and scoliosis survivor. She's spoken at the League of Utah Writers Conference, Caring for the Caregivers Group, and multiple venues about overcoming fear to succeed. Now, I love Lauri. She has been my friend for many years, and she's so dear to my heart. She was the first person to book me and to help me to get booked for my first paid speaking gig at the League of Utah Writers. And it was just a local chapter meeting. It wasn't the big, huge conference that she's spoken at. But I just love her, and I know you're going to love her too. She's got a lot of awesome stuff to share with us today. Lauri, welcome. Lauri. It's Lauri.
Hello, Lydia. It's okay. You got one pass. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you. So, what brought you to being an expert on recognizing your inner voice?
Well, first off, expert's such a fun word for me because I don't feel like I am an expert because there's so much growth I'm still learning that we can all continue to learn within ourselves. But I will tell you that a few years ago, so a little bit of my story, I grew up as a child abused. I was abused as a child. And a lot of that came with a lot of negative thoughts that were told to me as a kid, very young. And so when I was little, I remember at 8, 9 years old, I still could hear my inner voice. I remember very vividly, my mom would tell me all these horrible things that I wasn't smart or that she wished that I was never born. I'd never be good for anything. But I still had my inner voice of saying, no, you are a good person. That's not what she means. But over time, as I heard all of those voices and I, had beatings more occasionally, or not occasionally, but consistently, that noise, that inner voice was still there, but I couldn't hear it anymore because I was so tuned into what she was saying and believing. I started believing the things that she said to be my truths, even though they're not. That's what I was surrounded by so often that I started believing that, oh, this is really me. And so I grew up with a lot of that negativity, a lot of depression, a lot of feeling like if I was going to do anything good with my life, it would be to help other people, that I didn't deserve that time and attention for myself. And so as I was a mom, even growing up into motherhood, my 5-year-old, who is now 10, but when she was 5, had mentioned to me, had asked me, Mom, when I'm a mom, and again, she's 5, but she was so clear on what she had to say. When I'm a mom, am I going to be as unhappy as you? And that completely broke my heart of, she was 5, but she saw all that negative dialogue in some sort, like she was absorbing some of that. Even though I thought I wasn't showing that, she could still feel that. And that for me was kind of the turning point of, I want my kids to know that they can fail, that they're going to have hardships, that there's going to be massive struggles in their life, but never again will my kid ever have to ask me, will I be that unhappy as a mom? And so that was the turning point of me really getting my feet wet, trying to dive into books, motivational videos, coaching, to really try to understand how I could shift my life and my mindset to let go of all this negative feedback that I was hearing inside my head to be true for myself, but wasn't me. And so that was kind of a long, extended definition, but that was what kind of began as I started putting a lot of passion into who am I for myself, trying to learn how to love myself completely for me, not to be loved for someone else, of what someone else wanted me to be or what I should or shouldn't be, but who I wanted to be for myself and love that person completely. So it's been a passion for me, very, very focused for about 5 or 6 years, excuse me, just showing up every single day, to those tools, to my toolbox, and reminding myself why I love myself and showing up and doing those exercises. So I'm training my brain to let go of all that toxic behavior, all that negativity, all the things that have been holding me back, and rewiring it essentially to be a different tune of positivity, love, gentleness, ambition, which does take practice and it does take time, but has been a passion of mine for a while. So
I love that. I love that.
Thank you.
Kids are so amazing. I love having kids. They bring so much clarity to everything that we're doing and our purpose in life when we have kids. And I think people discount that quite a bit, that I think there's this idea in the world that kids are a burden or you have to be something for the kids. Or my biggest thing is people stay married for the kids. We're going to stay married for you. You know, that's your thing. But then kids are so good. They're such a blessing for us to have in our lives. My son yesterday, I had a little meltdown, freak out yesterday. And then I came back into the room. My son says, "I'm so glad you're happier now, Mom."
Oh,
we still have those toolboxes we need to open up every day and work on that.
yes.
Okay, we're going to have another break and we'll come back and visit more with Lauri and recognizing our inner voice. You're listening to Layers of Communication on the BBM Global Network, iHeartRadio, and TuneIn Radio. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart. Welcome back to Layers of Communication. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart. We're on the BBM Global Network, iHeartRadio, and TuneIn Radio. And today we're talking with Lauri Shoenfeld. We're discussing recognizing your inner voice. And Lauri, tell me, what does recognizing your inner voice mean to you? Before the break, you were talking about how you were able to still have it after, I don't remember recognizing it as a specific, like you described that when your mom was yelling at you and telling you things, you still were able to hear your voice inside saying, no, that's not what she means, and that's not true. How has that recognizing affected your life as you've been growing up, and what does it mean to you to be able to recognize your inner voice?
Yeah. So for me, recognizing my inner voice is kind of like it's your inner coach, you know, the Jiminy Cricket of your conscience, you know, where it's gentle, it's focused, very centered, kind of like a meditative, peaceful feeling. That's the core of when you hear that encouraging voice, that's your inner voice. And what happens just over time is, depending on what you're surrounded around, whether it's family, friends, workplace, you know, and then even your upbringing, you hold on to things from your upbringing, like you were mentioning with, you know, you can hear your mom sometimes, "Wow, Lydia, what are you doing?" You know, stuff like that ends up kind of fading the inner voice a little bit, where you second guess it. A lot of times in the past, I would second guess my inner voice, that peaceful feeling, because I'd listen or hear other things that people were saying, like, "Oh, that's not a good idea for you," or, "You know, that's not going to work." Or even I would tell myself from past experiences, like, "You've tried that before, you failed. Why would you do that again?" You know what I mean? And so it's really staying centered into, when you feel that peaceful, just really focused voice, that is the core essence of you. And all the rest of it that you hear a lot of times is the noise and the chaos from your mind and your thoughts of what you're hearing around you about yourself or about other people. And so I started, like I said, about 5 or 6 years ago, I started doing a lot of different practices and things to help me learn how to really center more into my core inner voice. So I would do, writing was a huge thing for me, because when you write, you're allowing yourself to be creative. There's a creative flow that goes into that. It's unfiltered. you're very vulnerable when you're writing. Typically, you're not writing for someone else. Usually, you're writing for yourself. And so I would get a lot of, as I was writing, I'd get a lot of what I was feeling for myself out on paper. And it wasn't, well, I should be doing this for, my friend, or I should be doing this because this is what my parents think I should do, or I should be doing this because this will make me a better wife. It was just, this is who you are. This is what you're doing. That's great. Not this is what you should be doing to be better. Mm-hmm. It was much more focused on the now of what I am doing. That's good. And I do daily affirmations. So all the negative thoughts, because we all have negative dialogue, right? We just choose either to allow it to consume us, or we decide to say, you know what, I'm not going to let you be in my space. And so if I start hearing that negative dialogue, like, Lauri, you're not smart, or, Lauri, you're not a good mom, or whatever it is that I'm hearing that day, I will shift it in my mind and say, I am smart. Lauri's smart, or I'm smart. I'm a good mom. And I'll say it multiple times until that brainwave and that negative dialogue fades. Sometimes it takes more times than not, mm-hmm. but it shifts things when you do that. And there's other things that I do as well, but those are a few main things that I show up and I do every single day that starts the day off centering me into recognizing my core of who I am. And I start at the morning, once the kids are off to school. So I'm really tuned in at the very beginning of the day to who I am without all the extra noise coming in. So
that's good. Do you also put yourself to sleep that same way?
You know what? I have not actually done that, but I am intrigued to actually do that now. I do. Before I go to bed, I typically will look at my day for the following day, but I usually write out some goals that are positive goals for myself. So, most of the time I will say, okay, I'm going to do my happy morning things every single day, which is what I call them. I have like a practice I do every morning, which mm-hmm. goes into my writing and my affirmations. But I read usually motivational books, or I go to bed before bed listening to motivational video. Something of that nature, but that's positive and healthy, that tunes my brain into that positive focus rather than the negative.
That's great. Yeah, I was talking with my husband today about our morning and evening routines. Every so often we fall out of our routine, right? We get caught up in the world and whatever is happening in our schedules. Yes. And so we were revisiting that again today. And we've only got one vehicle right now. So that's kind of changing how we used to do our routine. And
mm-hmm. Yes.
But it's so beneficial to have a morning and an evening routine, whether it's motivational video or anything else. My negativity used to always come from bad dreams and nightmares. I would wake up in the night mm-hmm. and just have a big problem. And then I could wake up and do my morning just great, but it's that sleeping time. And so I found when I put myself to bed with intentions to have a good sleep, as well as wake up to have a good intention for the day, those bookends really set things in order. So,
I love motivation. That's wonderful.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things. That there's so many different ways we can start our day and end our day in positive ways. There's so many options. And I have found that writing, oh my goodness, writing is such a good thing. And do you use a pen and paper or the computer for your writing? Do you find a difference with that?
Yes. So when I'm doing like creative writing for my books, I'll do my computer. But when I am journaling or I am writing down thoughts of the day, which I call morning pages, I do a notebook and a pen. And there is a difference there because with my notebook and pen, it feels much more raw. I just get everything out, and it feels more, I don't know, more authentic for me to just write everything out on paper when I'm in that motion, because I'll find myself on the computer wanting to, like, you know, if I make a mistake, going back and editing my journaling, which is not allowing me to be in that flow and that process of really getting all of those emotions and those thoughts out on paper. You know, it's almost backtracking what I was trying to do. So
yes, I thought that was
totally
what you'd say, because I feel the same way about writing.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a break again. You're on iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and the BBM Global Network. This is Layers of Communication. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart. We're visiting with Lauri Shoenfeld, and we'll be back. Welcome back to iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and the BBM Global Network. This is Layers of Communication. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart, and today we're visiting with Lauri Shoenfeld about recognizing our inner voice. All right, Lauri, today, what differences would you see in your life and your relationships if you were not able to recognize your inner voice? What kind of difference is this making in your life?
Oh my goodness. So going back to about 5 years ago when my daughter had made that comment, I was the girl who pretended that I had everything together. You know, massive people pleaser, try to listen to a lot of what other people said I should be doing. And there were parts of me that were happy and striving to be happy, but in the core, I was really, really depressed. And I was even mad that I was depressed because I was thinking to myself, why are you so upset? You have an amazing husband. You have, you know, your beautiful kids. There's so much to be grateful for, but I was living so much for what other people wanted me to do that there was just a sadness there. There was still a void that I couldn't really process how to fix, but I knew that I didn't want to be that way anymore. And I think, you know, I'd had a few panic attacks, again, massive depression. After my daughter made that comment, I was like, I want to teach my child and my kids, my future kids, how to not feel this way. And the only way that I knew that I could do that is if I taught by example, which meant that I had to get my crap together and figure out how to really learn how to love myself. And today I look, and of course there's always things that I still massively fell at. There's things that are a work in progress, but I am much more gentle and loving with myself. There's not this perfection element of, oh my gosh, you are doing awful. If I mess up, I'm like, you know what? That's okay. Look at what else you did today. That was really, really good, which years ago, if I messed up on anything, it broke me. I went straight to, oh, you're an awful person. Like, you know, and now I'm really able to see the good that I am doing, like truly, honestly, what I'm striving to do better at, rather than, you know, seeing that as that failure is a bad thing. I look at failure as, okay, well, we fell down. That means you tried. That was a really good effort. Let's get up and try again. So, I mean, goodness, just looking back, like I feel sad even thinking about how I used to be, because it was really sad. And now I just feel so much more at peace. I feel joyous within my own skin. And I think that's the core essence of listening to your inner voice, is when you're really listening to yourself, even if you are trying really hard to do things for other people. If you're not happy within your own skin and you're not happy within yourself, you're not really helping those around you, even though you're trying to. You're, you know, they still see that you're unhappy. And so once I started to feel happy and learning those techniques, things shifted within my family and my relationships. When I had a good relationship with myself, you know, I saw different things, more positive things within my relationship with my children, and the way that I viewed situations that maybe weren't the best situations, I was able to find positivity rather than, oh my goodness, this is going to break me. So it really has played a massive shift in my life as a whole when you change that mindset with just everything.
That's beautiful. And that mindset change, it can just ripple out to so many places that you don't even imagine.
Yep.
I was thinking while you're talking about changing and shifting your relationships, it reminded me of a relationship that I've been struggling with over the years, just generally speaking. And I did something in my new mindset, and my sister calls me and she's like, "Are you feeling extra Christ-like today or something?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "You just did that." I was like, "What?" And I didn't even recognize, because I've come so far from where I used to be, I didn't even recognize the effort that I had put into mending and fixing that relationship to a point. And
yes.
And so, yeah, our inner voice and being at peace with who we are, does it affect your decisiveness, your decision making? How does it affect your decision making?
Oh, goodness. Yeah. So, before, when you're listening to all the other inner voices that you have in your head from, people around you, it makes it much more confusing when you're trying to make decisions because you have, maybe mom in one part of your brain or, an old friend in another section of your brain. You have all this noise. And when you are centered in your core, it's much easier for you to just say, okay, this is what I want to do, and it may not be what other people think I should do, but this is what feels right and best for me. And not feeling that guilt, letting go of that guilt of, I might make somebody upset if I make this decision, because you just know that I know myself and this feels right for me. So even if it upsets someone else, that's not my intention. But I trust myself and I know where my heart is. And I think that's a huge step, because that was really hard as a people pleaser. That used to be a huge, hard decision for me because I didn't want to disappoint other people. I didn't want to let other people down. And so I had that shift of, this is what I feel is right, but then this is what somebody's going to be upset about if I don't do this. And so kind of just being more in tune to yourself and knowing and believing that what you're feeling is you and that it's okay. And other people don't have to necessarily agree with what you're doing, but if it feels best for you, then that's it, and letting that guilt go. So that was a huge process for me to learn too.
Yes, and letting that guilt go, that's really huge, to be able to let that guilt go and not just recognize our inner voice, but take that action on what our inner voice is speaking to and trust ourselves, being able to really trust ourselves. I think that's one of the things that gets lost when we're listening to the other voices. We lose our trust. And
yes.
I think that's really amazing to point out too. All right, it is time for another break. So you're listening on the BBM Global Network, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio. This is Layers of Communication. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart, and we're visiting with Lauri Shoenfeld. Stay close. Welcome back to Layers of Communication on iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and the BBM Global Network. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart. Today we're visiting with Lauri Shoenfeld about recognizing our inner voice. Okay, Lauri, we've talked about writing and focusing on the now and repeating positives until the negative fades away, and really choosing into what kind of voice we want to have in our head and putting that there until the other voices go away. Can you tell us more about your writing, and how would our audience implement writing, not just to write a book, but to allow ourselves to tune in to our inner voice?
Yes. Okay. So writing, when I do usually anywhere from 3 to 5 pages of longhand writing in the morning. And before I get started, I kind of get myself in this space where I tell myself that I'm just going to let go. And the reason why I do that is because a lot of times, just as people, before we write, we still want to filter, right? Like just how we are around other people, we want to filter out parts of who we are. We don't want to say the nitty gritty. We don't want to tell too much. We don't want to sound like we're being too much of a sob story. But the part that's healing and refreshing is when you come to those pages, you tell yourself that you're going to let it go, and then you put that all on the page. It's not pretty writing. You get the anger out, maybe frustrations that you're feeling, things that are bothering you, that are making you sad, things that you feel within yourself, but being completely honest with your pages. And they're not for anyone else. They're just for you, where you get everything out that you're feeling. It is not edited. It is not filtered. It is strictly whatever is in your heart and in your mind. And by doing that, that gives you that safe space. It allows you to be able to put those things on paper that maybe you wouldn't feel comfortable putting out there in the world yet, or putting out there in your fiction writing, or putting out there in relationships at the moment. But that helps you as you put it on paper to process those thoughts that you've put on paper throughout the day. And it's interesting that when you really let yourself let go, those thoughts will follow you throughout the day, and then you start gaining clarity on those things that have been bothering you. Relationships that maybe aren't working, where then you can start processing, okay, here's how maybe we could fix those problems, or let's try this. So it really just sets it up. It's kind of like a map, I feel like, when you're writing. It's like a map. You get it all out, and then the rest of the day you're kind of finding those pieces of how to connect to make things better in your life. But you have to be really vulnerable and real first before you can find those solutions. So just be vulnerable and real and just get it out. And that's the best advice I have for that, is no editing, no perfect writing. Just be you and let it go.
Did you have a hard time at the beginning when you first started this writing process? Did you have a hard time being vulnerable and allowing yourself to go into that place?
Yes. My first few notebooks, I have now. I was telling my husband, like, just with my morning pages, I could probably have 5 novels done and published at this point, right? Because I have so many notebooks. But the first 10 entries, I went back and I had all these, like, I tried to edit my writing, and then there were parts where I'd start getting vulnerable, and then I'd be like, but everything's okay, and I wouldn't really allow myself to say, okay, everything is not okay, but how are we going to find a solution to make it better? And I think it took me a while to process that. It's okay to say that you're not okay, but let's find a different way to make it better for next time so that I can move forward. But yeah, the first 10 entries, it took a while to be vulnerable, but then again, like when you show up every single day, it is a flow, it is a process. It's not something that just happens overnight, but the more you show up, the more you're able to hear your inner voice and really just let go as you do those practices every single day. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I find a lot of people will be afraid, like you say, to go into that vulnerable place, and we'll start out like, oh, this makes me so mad. And then we'll turn it around and be like, oh, but this is good. And this is good. Like we have to compensate for our negativity, even when we're writing and nobody else is going to see it except for us. We still are afraid of going all the way there. So do you leave it completely like, and then it made me angry and rawr, and then you're done. You close the book and you carry on and just let it process?
Yeah, so I do my morning pages first, so I get it all out, and then I go into doing my morning affirmations. So I get all that negative energy that I'm feeling out on paper, and then I go into doing positive affirmations. Usually do about 15. I listen to motivational videos. I meditate, so I it's like a teeter-totter. I balance out letting go of the negativity and refixing it with that positive energy and that positive space. But by letting it go, I'm now able to, my brain has more space to actually process what's going on now that I've said see you later on the paper.
And when we get it out, then we can put something else in its place.
Yes.
I think
and usually
people
we do.
are afraid of it too, because we think that when we're getting it out and we're focusing on it, then that is going to be our focus, but it's not. It's a release and moving it so we can put something that we want in its place.
Right.
That's fantastic. Well, we're almost to our last break. Before we get there, I want to make sure that you've shared everything that you want to. Are there any other tips that you want to share before we're done visiting today?
Yeah, so I would just say, as far as recognizing your inner voice, I think so many people feel that, it's very overwhelming, that they want to figure it out right away. And I think my biggest thing that I've learned is nothing good comes right away. It takes time, and it takes practice, and it takes effort. But I think that scares people away of, well, I don't even want to get started because it's going to be so hard and it's going to be so much work. But what we're missing is, by showing up every single day and taking care of ourselves, the impact that we have on other people and those around us, our children, our relationships with other people. We start at taking care of us, but then it also affects other people in a positive light and nature as well, which is much more empowering, I think. Even though it sounds hard, it will make your life more full and much better once you start being able to really say, okay, I'm going to show up every day even though this is hard. This is going to benefit me for the rest of my life.
That is so true, so true. Those ripple effects, our layers can get so far out and reach into other people's layers of who they are. We can affect the people around us by our own taking care of us. Lauri, where can people find you?
So I'm on Instagram and Facebook under Lauri. It's Lauri Shoenfeld, Schoenfeld. It's a mouthful. I've had Lauri Shoenfeld. I know people are like, "Are you Larry?" I'm like, "No." But it's Lauri Shoenfeld at Instagram and Facebook. And feel free if anyone has any questions, about some of the process that I've gone through or different techniques, exercises they'd like. I'd be happy to send those over as well. So.
Thank you. Yes, I think we could just talk for a month, and we've run out of time already. So I would love to have you on the show again in the future, Lauri.
I would love it. Thank you.
All right, we're going to go to break. You're on iTunes Radio, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, BBM Global Network, Layers of Communication. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart. Welcome back to iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and the BBM Global Network. You're listening to Layers of Communication. I am your host, Lydia Taggart. I'm so glad you're able to be here with me today, and hope you've been able to get some really good pointers and tips on recognizing your inner voice. What can this recognizing your inner voice do for you? Can it change your relationships? Can it bring you peace and joy to your core of your soul? I think it can. When we are able to tune out the noise, like Lauri was talking about, we are able to listen to what we personally want and believe. And it can go, like Lauri says, with her growing up being abused and whatnot, it can help in those situations. Or if we're not in those drastic situations, it can help in smaller, less dramatic examples. And remember, one time when I was a little girl, I was always a very good girl, very good girl. And I never said anything that was bad or mean. I tried really, really hard to be good. And this one day, I remember I was like 12 years old, and I was madder than I'd ever thought in my entire life I could ever be so mad. And I was fighting with my sisters, and I thought, you know what? I am going to swear at them. I'm so mad. And I built this up, and I thought, yep, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to say these bad swear words. And I threw my hairbrush across the room, and I let those swear words fly. And it was not who I was. And it was so obvious that it was not me. And my sisters started laughing because it was so funny to see me out of my element. And I didn't take on the swearing role very well. And I didn't go there. It's not who I am. I'm still a good girl. But if we are doing these writings, you can let it all out and not worry about someone's going to laugh at you or have any other judgments on us. We just be vulnerable and let it all out. 100% let it out. I'm so glad that we're able to have these tips on recognizing our inner voice. You want to visit me at lydiataggart.com. The free ebook is only going to be there today and tomorrow, so make sure you go and get it if you haven't got that yet. It's a really great tool for improving your communication and making more time for your relationships. And remember, you are worth it, and so are they. Well, make it a great week, and we'll see you next time. Love you. Bye.
You've been listening to Layers of Communication with your host, Lydia Taggart. Tune in next week as we break through the layers in order to communicate and connect down to your core on Lydia Taggart's Layers of Communication.
You've been listening to the BBM Global Network. The ideas, views, and opinions of this broadcast are those of the participants of the program and are not necessarily the ideas, views, and opinions of the BBM Global Network Company.